Welcome to the 2024 results. This is the third year running. Let's set the context more than anything, I think. Is the volume of change increasing? A few statistics not from our survey to widen things out. There's been results coming in from a variety of surveys this year. I sat down and read an awful lot of them between September and October. 43% of CEOs believe that the tempo certainly the pace of organizational transformational change is going up, compared to about 19% think that it's going to slow down. They also think that 64% said, and I think it's really interesting, AI success will depend on adoption, not the technology. So there's a people element to that I think is very, very interesting. Recognizing that you can have any platform that you like, but if it's not being used and if it's not changing how people work, we're in trouble. I thought PwC survey saying that 35% of CEOs believe the workforce need retraining and reskilling over the next 3 years because of the adoption of AI, which is up. It's up 29% on the year, up from a 6%. Oh yes, we need to retrain, to 35%. Now, I highlight that because we know that retraining, reskilling is actually people adopting a completely different view of the world, a view of where they fit in the organization, what they can be proud of, where their confidence comes from, where their status comes from. All of that will be changing. And I thought it was interesting in the EY survey, again, about a third of CEOs cited changing customer needs as the main disruptor. So being able to answer questions about how are you improving the customer experience and what changes are you making, we know that widens out into a lot of process change, not just system change. There's a well-quoted Gartner statistic, but it's well worth thinking about. They were talking about transformation remaining central to the business agenda in 2023 and again in 2024. In 2023, they were able to say that employees were experiencing 10 planned enterprise changes in the last year alone, and they're getting fatigued. And we know that that's up from 2 enterprise-wide changes in 2016. But also, more interestingly, willingness to support organizational change has collapsed from about 3/4 of staff on board with the idea in 2016 to 43% now. So over a third of staff are saying, no, I've had enough. KPMG came out with some similar statistics, by the way. 88% of enterprises are currently running 2 significant transformation programs, and actually 59% of organizations are running 3 or more significant transformation programs. So there's a lot happening in terms of the volume of change. And this is why we started this survey to begin with. We had a number of questions like the volume of change. Is it really increasing? What's driving change? Do we appreciate the need to manage it? Is it perceived as delivering value? Is change management supported by senior leaders? And I think certainly after the first year, we really did double down on, do organizations appreciate the need to manage change, or is it still seen as an at the side of the desk optional activity? So these are the questions that drove our desire to gain the results. It's a truly global survey. The North American and including Canada response rate has gone up 3% from 10% last year. The Australian and New Zealand response rate has gone up from 5% to 12% this year. We've split out the United Kingdom from Europe because after Brexit, it would not be true to say that the UK is part of Europe. And we've seen just a 1% drop across the combined figures. The general Europe figure of 65% last year is now 64% across UK and Europe. what we did notice this year was that there was a few percentage points drop across Middle East, Asia, Africa and South America, where we had gone out and more specifically reminded people that the survey existed in those continents earlier. We didn't this year simply because we didn't have the time, and we did see that people were finding the survey for themselves, but not necessarily in those countries. However, I do know from my own work that South Africa is a hotbed of change practitioners as well as change initiatives. And across South America, I increasingly see demand for more structured approaches to change management. Next thing we also asked you at the start was about your role in change. And it's interesting to note that sort of 60% are either as a change manager, as a change consultant, and 86% of respondents were solely responsible for delivering change activities. In other words, not splitting themselves up over other things, but absolutely change practitioners. But behind the scenes, what was really interesting, and I have picked up on this in the report, is the wide variety of job titles by which we go. And as you see the data come in, you can start to see just how many of us have got different roles. From we might be change, we might be transformation, we might be analysts, leaders, practitioners, managers, senior managers, directors. So there's a whole range of permutations and combinations. Sometimes the words change or transformation are not used, and instead we have adoption or transition coming in. And in some cases, a much smaller number I've noticed is around change capability, or capability as the word. But I does make me question personally this huge plethora of ways in which we describe ourselves. Does that show a lack of confidence in our profession? Does it show a naivety about what's happening? Something to think about in terms of how we confuse people is we don't really easily describe what it is, what our title is. There's no quick shorthand that everybody goes, oh yeah, I get what they do. And that isn't true in the project management world particularly. And I think that's the thing. It's just maybe we're letting ourselves down a little bit by not being very specific and making it easy. There are a lot of combinations. We have people and change, we have projects and change, we have sometimes portfolio and change. So in addition to the plethora of these other titles, we're also being jammed together with other things. So in the project world, project management, change management, we'll get a project and change manager. We'll sometimes get communications added on as well. So we might be change and communications, sometimes change and training. But it was just that wide variety that really struck me. How would we describe the changes? Well, Jill and I have just been talking about this, and increasing digitization. Jill can explain it, and she has explained it in the report, that we allowed people to select more than one, because we did feel that there isn't just one driving force for change. And that goes back to Gartner's view that you know, many organizations are doing up to 10 enterprise-wide change initiatives. KPMG are saying the same thing about the number of enterprise-wide changes taking place simultaneously. So we couldn't just give you one. We thought that would be inappropriate. So, but what's interesting is that when you look at it, increasing digitization, often driven by efficiencies, all the digital transformations you're involved in. If you have a think about it, we've got a new platform, we're going to join some of our systems together, but an awful lot of it is ultimately about smarter working. We want less manual interventions. We want one single source of the truth when it comes to data. We don't want to have to repeat ourselves and do things more than once. So increasing digitization, and then the next highest one was increasing operational efficiencies. And then the next highest one was reorganization. about 55%. But again, we often know that reorganizations are about efficiencies. There are a lot of change teams being let go at the moment, trying to create efficiencies. We need fewer people to do these tasks. So if you look at all of that, there's a huge push. There's very much an efficiency agenda. But what caught my eye was around about the sort of 43% was new strategic direction. And this year we put in the adopting artificial intelligence as something different, something specific, rather than just wrapping it all into increasing digitization. Those caught my eye because they are perhaps more innovative. They are more about pushing the organization forward, new strategic direction. AI is going to be more about opportunities and completely reworking how we do things. So it's interesting, isn't it, that the ones that are the kinds of changes that are pushing us forward to do something more interesting, to do something different, are actually lower ranked. And it's efficiencies and all aspects of efficiencies that are at the highest level. Jill, let me know if there's any questions that are going in the chat at any point. Otherwise, I'll just keep going.
Questions, but one interesting comment was about the fact that these are very similar things. These reasons for change, they're just looked at in a different way.
Yeah, and it's as I said, I do think that there are what comes across very clearly to me is the top three are very much about efficiency. The next two down, let's put those under the heading perhaps of growth agenda. But whilst CEOs are talking all the time about that growth agenda and moving towards their strategic objectives, it is not the dominating factor for those of us at the sharp end of making change happen. And so there is an awful lot within an organization where the attention is focused, where the energy is being used, is actually on improving what we have now, streamlining what we have now, trying to change how we do things, but certainly not changing what we do. And yet, if you read across all of the different sources of information at a more strategic level, like Harvard Business Review and McKinsey Quarterly are my favorite go-tos, but Forbes also comes out with some interesting stuff. There's this whole piece about recognizing that actually we need to do things completely differently if we're really going to exploit the impact of AI. And yet it's still, for 2024 compared to what we did last year, it's efficiency. So I think those are the two drivers, but growth is lower than efficiency. I'm really pleased to see that we are saying that as opposed to some of the basic measures like completed on time, completed to budget, that how we measure the success of our changes is about people working differently, the organisation becoming more productive and successful, and customer staff satisfaction. If you're not on mute, by the way, could you mute yourselves? I can see a few of you who are not, and I can hear bits of noise. The thing is, the organisation is more productive, customers or staff are more satisfied, absolutely, they are connected to benefits, but the people have adopted the new ways of working is a means to an end, not the end itself, if we're looking from a benefits perspective. And that is of concern, that over 80% of us are reporting back on the adoption rates. I was in a meeting this morning where that was being discussed about how many people have transitioned to this new system. And all the time I'm screaming in my head, yes, but what difference has it made? So I think we're back to there is a lot more work for us to do if only under 2/3 of us are talking about the results of what we achieve. The measuring the success of change shouldn't be about how many people are working in that new way, but it should be about, is the organisation more productive, more successful, are staff or customers more satisfied, all of which goes to the bottom line of benefits. So again, there's a lot of work to do there. The reasons why we develop capability and change is actually accelerate realization of benefits. Ability to manage changing internal priorities, I'm glad that's up there, because the volume of change isn't going to go down anytime soon, and therefore surely we have multiple competing internal priorities. So having people who can actually understand the impact of change, understand the total impact on business as usual of change, and be able to make intelligent decisions about what changes we prioritize, all of those skills are absolutely essential. But it's interesting that the top one there is we want to develop capability of change to accelerate the realization of benefits. Great, but let's make sure that the benefits we measure are more about what the results of what we do are. So I think there's something here about, we don't just count the numbers of people who've started using something, we count the numbers of that are resulting from that use. So there's something to be done there. What's stopping change? Now, this is when this is back to how do we improve our world? So we're talking here about the barriers that we're experiencing. And I think that there are 4 things here that are all actually connected. They're all very high ranking. Change management activities are not understood. Well, if something's not understood, I think there's a link here between that and senior leadership involvement. Senior leaders don't tend to get involved in something that lacks clarity. If we're not if we're not explaining what we do connects directly to commercial benefits, customer or staff satisfaction and engagement, and that the organisation is reaping some kind of financial benefit from what we've done, revenue up, cost down, then I'm not sure that we're going to get senior management attention. If we don't have their attention, then it's very hard to argue for the resources, because if you don't value something, then why would you want to give it resources if the senior leaders are not that involved, because actually the change activities are not understood? Then ergo, the 4th one there, change management not valued, which is what we're going to come up with a little bit more in a moment. What elements of best practice have been implemented? Although we've got some high ones at the end here, we track all our change initiatives. Just look at that. Just over half of us say we track all our change initiatives. We're going to pick this up in a theme in a moment about portfolio management. Similar number have a central change management office. Just a fewer have a change management process, just over 50%. And again, we're going to have a look at how these figures here actually play out in some of the wider themes. And again, we're training people, we have a set of tools. Again, they are around 40%, 4 in 10. So 6 in 10 aren't even training people in change management. So the basic premise of building that capability. So I think, again, where are we going with these results? I mean, as a established profession. Just as a background to the results I'm going to dig into now, when we planned the survey 3 years ago, what we did was we examined a huge number of assessments and reports. We also looked at things like the maturity models that are out in the marketplace. And we basically came up with these 6 headings that all in some way connect. You've got to have an approach, but there's got to be some agility behind that approach, and you've got to make sure the approach is adopted. You've got to make sure that actually whatever changes you're doing, you've got to be agile, but there's got to be some alignment back to strategic objectives. If you want people to follow the approach, you've got to have capability. But similarly, with resilience, we needed some questions under resilience, because if you haven't got resilience, then nobody will actually deliver, because they'll give up halfway through. So those were some of the basics. You can read more about that in the report, but just as a highlight things. I'm going to summarize some of our key results and look at the figures as much as anything else. So the highest scoring, we were champions of. There's obviously a strong feeling that the organisation believes that managing change is important, although I'm going to question in a little while whether or not that's actually borne out by some of the activities. So we think that managing change is important, but what's happening? People openly talk about the pressure of change. I'm really glad that that's so high now, because I think the pressure of change, the volume of change is getting higher, the pressures are getting higher, and people have got to have an outlet. They've got to be able to vent that. And we obviously think that the changes we're making are aligned to the strategy that we're going for. But we did say that there were certain things that perhaps we need to think more about how we do it. And these are all in the 20%. My organisation is fast at decision making. No, it's not. And also that it doesn't effectively optimise its portfolio. Well, if it's not fast at decision making, it probably can't optimise anything, because by the time you've taken your optimisation decision, the circumstances have moved on and probably it's no longer optimal. So the two are deeply connected. And we've seen this before about one of the barriers is senior management involvement, and they're just they're not accountable for building the skills. It's not seen as a strategic contribution. It's not an area that's important. The problem is, would you say that about other areas within the organisation? We hear a lot at the moment from senior leaders about the need to build digital skills, data analytics skills. You know, you wouldn't go around saying, oh, financial awareness is not important. And yet apparently building the basic skills in change management is not important for 3/4 of our organisations. So something to think about. What were most improved? Activities to manage change and known was up 25%. People openly talk about the pressures was up 17%, and changes aligned to company strategy was up 17%. And then you'll see that these figures are down 28%, down 28%. And further down again on organisation optimises its change portfolio. So down 32%, a third. So there's been some big falls as well. So what we identified when we were pulling all this together is, at the end of the day, you can interpret results however you want. Is there a theme? Is there a story? And I have to be honest, I sat on these results for several weeks and I went through them multiple times. And I came up with this main conclusion, that the thread that holds all of these, and let's be honest, very low scores together, is that change management is not valued. It's not seen as a valuable service, a commercially viable way to spend our money and time. So I looked at all the things that might be leaking away from this statement, because this is a more positive statement, change management as a valued service. That's where I want us to get to. But I noticed that the things were leaking away. Do change activities deliver commercial value? Do we prioritise changes to ensure impact doesn't lower operational ability? So there's a whole piece in there about portfolios, senior leaders and their role in sponsorship, sufficient resources, a simple approach that anybody, and not just change managers, and I think that's the issue, isn't it, that we're not trying to just have an approach that change managers can follow, but we have an approach that anybody who knows nothing about change but can participate, and then change is a positive experience. And this is something that I've been bringing up now in terms of being a transforming organisation with senior leaders. I wonder if over the last 10 years, I'm starting to recognise now that the sponsorship work that I do with senior leaders, it is very hard to get that on the agenda. I don't know if some of you want to put in the chat whether or not you feel the same way, but it's very, very difficult to get senior leaders to turn up to any kind of sponsorship training. You might be able to do it in one-to-one coaching, but that doesn't always get us the volume that we need. And so I have started to turn situations around now where I'm talking not about sponsors sponsoring an individual change initiative, but I'm talking about senior leaders being part of an organisation that is continually transforming. So this transforming organisation is the sort of couple of words I've started to use. And as soon as I do that, I'm able to talk about the fact that you can drive an individual change through, making everybody comply with it, and you will realize your initial financial benefits, efficiency gains, or whatever. But as a result of driving it through on that compliance basis, you will do this. You will have people who will leave the organisation or withdraw their voluntary effort because the experience of change is so poor. And the second thing is that when you come to call on them again, as you will, because you are part of a transforming organisation, they will withdraw their effort. They will be much slower to convince that they should in any way be involved in the next change or the change after that. And so you're actually lowering overall organisational capability because people will just go, this is a very poor experience. In fact, I don't even want to be here for the next changes. So I think all of these factors on benefits, portfolios, leadership, capability, approach, and the experience are all leaking things away from us being a valuable management service, a valuable strategic partner. I don't know if anybody's putting any comments in there, but what I thought I'd do now is show you where I'm getting these results from and what my conclusions are. What I've done is I've taken these 6 dimensions and all the factors underneath them, and Jill and I have cross-checked everything and actually started to pull things out as a theme. So there's a couple in here that I wanted to draw to our attention. There are various questions dotted around underneath the different dimensions, but noticing that we always measure the benefits achieved from change is down to, well, it's never been particularly high, but it's gone from starting with a 4 to starting with a 3, which is truly horrendous. So we always measure the benefits, and yet we put in a new one this year, which was we check change as added value, and that's 56%. Well, if we always measure the benefits of achieved from changes only just over a third, how do we get to over a half where we're checking that it's added value? So does that indicate that we've got some confusion about whether or not benefits and value are the same thing? Are we just not understanding what realizing benefits actually does for an organization? Either way, the figures are incredibly low. We don't do this in our own lives, do we? We don't invest in something like a new dishwasher and then don't have conversations about whether or not it's washing the dishes effectively. Is it saving us time? Is it making the finishing off of meals in our house better? You know, we don't just spend money and then never look back and go, well, did that do something good for us as a family? We just don't do it. People are starting to talk about, purchasing their summer holidays now, and not unsurprisingly, considering the weather's been so appalling. You anticipate the fantastic time that's going to be, and after it you discuss all of the fantastic times that you've had. We don't do this in any other aspect of our lives, so why do we're so busy sort of let's get it done, and the next question is what's next, not what did we achieve. So there's something there that we have got to have an entire, I think, strategy in change, but we've just got to start counting the benefits. I was with somebody this morning where I was doing some coaching, and for the change capability community. Actually, I'm doing this again as a free event on the 18th of December, which is about how do we express our achievements and our value as change professionals. So updating your LinkedIn profile before Christmas. And it was really interesting that, it was like a fight back about, well, I can't claim that and I can't claim that. I wasn't the only person to do that. And, well, I wasn't around to measure that. I'm thinking, heavens, if we can't state that we, as a result of what we do, something meaningful happens, something that people care about happens. And I think you can widen that out to the plus side, we've achieved something, but we've also removed the risks of something. We were talking at the change capability community on Friday about how we can immediately calculate some financial benefits associated with any change. if you take the business case for the project, the tangible changes, we've invested some money there. And we also anticipate that we're going to get some savings. Let's assume that we've spent 250,000 on IT licenses for a certain platform, and we've got some consultancy in from that technology firm. We've brought in some contractors, but all in all, a package of £250,000 has been spent on getting this system configured, data into it, up and running. And let's keep it really simple. 500,000 is the anticipated benefits over the next 3 years, the efficiency benefits. So if we are not there to deliver those benefits, we've lost £500,000. At the same time, £250,000 of actual expenditure has been wasted. So the total loss is 750,000. Even if you want to say, well, 1 in 3 change initiatives fails to deliver its benefits, that's still, 250,000 of there's a 1 in 3 chance that we won't deliver those benefits. So you could mark that down as 250,000 of loss. I just don't think we're as comfortable with the numbers as we need to be. And in fact, I think this is something that we're bringing together now in the platform Changeability Pro. We've done a whole load of neuro hacks, those brain smart solutions on data, and we've always had something in there about how do we present the value of change management as either a benefit or as risk reduction, but I think we're heading towards doing a lot more of that in 2025. So I think that's a major trend, is that we're just not comfortable with the numbers, and because we're not comfortable, we're not thinking of all the things that we can track, so we're not thinking of all the things we can prove. And therefore, I want to get that figure of, we always measure the benefits achieved from change, up past 37%. I looked through, and to be honest, I could describe an awful lot of the factors we looked at in the survey to portfolio management. I think some of these also will connect back to benefits as well, but there's a few things here. Can we really do effective change management if there's no kind of portfolio management? If we go back to the volume of change is continuing to increase, I thought it was really interesting that when, reading all the CEO surveys, and I know I called out the IBM one for saying 43% of CEOs believe that the tempo of their transformations is going to increase. But that was just one figure amongst a whole load of other large consultancies doing their surveys, where, to be honest, it was coming out very similarly. So there's an awful lot of CEOs who want to go even faster. They want to increase the pace. And yet we can't actually say, slow down, or no, put something on hold, or let's prioritize a bit more, because we're just not mapping, we're not tracking things. Look at that figure. 4 in 10 are tracking the cumulative workload of change. The cumulative workload, the total impact of all the changes. So there's 6 in 10 who haven't got a clue. Why do I think the changes aligned to company strategy is so high? Because I think actually these are change. They kind of, there's a link there. I think that I could look at any of the changes that I'm working on for organisations, and I can map it back to a vision statement, a mission statement, or a strategic objectives on their website. I think I can do that. So I'm not surprised that's high. Where I'm really interested in is, yes, but are we looking at the total impact of doing this change, and this change on how we service the business? And do we really understand the full size of a change? If we don't look at a change for its interdependencies, its duplications, or things that are missing, do we really understand the impact of it anyway? Do we really understand the size? What's involved? Probably not. The fact that 55% of us think that our organisation anticipates and plans for change. I was with a group of senior leaders, very senior leaders, 2 weeks ago, and I thought they had a moment of discovery on this point, which was, I encouraged them to look back at all the changes they had made in the previous year, because we're coming up to planning for 2025, and it's a brilliant little activity because it made them really think. and I said, were you running around like crazy this year? Did you feel under tremendous pressure? Did you just question, how on earth are we going to get all of this done? And did you make certain changes where you know that you didn't fully land them, that there was so much more to do, that you feel like you did a sort of skim job where you did the absolute basics but nothing else? What would you do differently next year? And in anticipating that it's a dead cert, there will be a lot of changes taking place. And in fact, I even got them to list some of the ones they already know, and they even recognise for me as we were talking, oh yeah, but we don't, we think actually the CRM's going to be changing, but we're not sure. So that will come out later in the year. So they had quite a few significant changes already. They just completed an acquisition, and they know that those changes are going to take place throughout the next year. So just encouraging them to sort of maybe anticipate based on an existing track record of change. So I think there's something very simple we can do here, is getting senior leaders to talk about the number of changes that happened in 2024 and say, you're going to get at least the same level, if not higher number of changes in 2025. What are you going to do to make this possible? Not a bad question to ask. Not fast at decision making, and then changes are prioritized in the organization. Well, for me, I think that's a warning sign, saying that we prioritize change, but are we doing it very well? Because if we're very slow at decision making, the basis on which we prioritize something may not be up to date with all the latest factors, because that prioritization decision's gone up various levels and taken a while to come back down again as well. So I query, all right, maybe half of us are prioritizing, but are we doing it in the right way? And then you just have to look at the one below it and go, actually, my organization effectively optimizes its change portfolio is still only a quarter. So maybe we're not. And by the way, the reason I grouped these under portfolio management is a number of these factors were in different dimensions. So when you answered the survey, you were not answering one after the other. So you didn't build up a level of logic, shall we say, which affected your figures. It was these were all scattered everywhere, and it's why I brought them all together for you to see it. And each change builds on the previous change. Okay, half of us are thinking that, but the other half mean it's going off in all different tangents. And one of the things I know from being the chief examiner for the neuroscience for change qualification is that the first thing that does, as far as the brain is concerned, is if it doesn't look like it's all flowing together, the brain goes, oh, we're going off at a tangent. Well, that will need some thinking about. I will just wait. So we'll come off the path. I'll just hang around here and wait for some more information and be absolutely certain. So when each change doesn't build on the previous change, what we've created is ready-made resistance to change. Happy so far, Jill? You're the arbitrator here.
Absolutely, and I'm putting some of the stats as I go along in the chat. So when we looked at this question about not fast at decision making, I found that the education sector and the utilities section scored 0%, with utilities just over 25%. And somebody's asked me on healthcare, so let me just switch to my stats. Fast on decision making. Healthcare is up at just over 25%. I'm looking at a graph, so I can't give you exact numbers, but slightly over 25%. So there's some quite low numbers in there.
Yeah, they don't get any better, do they? We know that a barrier to change is senior leadership involvement. So I culled out a couple of things that really, really hit home for me. We know that senior leaders are not taking the lead on building change management skills. And without their sponsorship, without their involvement, we're not getting the commitment of budget to that area. So this is a massive issue, considering, after all, that change affects every single individual in the organisation. So I have a big concern that what this means is that we are not building resilience, we are not providing well-being for people who are affected by change, because if you are in some way trained in the subject, then it gives you some coping strategies for being able to cope with the very high volume, even if, as I do myself sometimes, I will acknowledge that I'm perhaps very early on in a change and therefore I am naturally resisting it because my brain is simply going, that was the old way and I kind of knew it and loved it. This is the new way. It all looks a bit spiky and threatening. You know, just by knowing some of the models around the emotional and psychological transition of change gives me comfort. And the fact that other people don't get that kind of comfort, they don't get that reassurance that what they're learning about is actually, yeah, okay, this is normal. I feel this way, but other people will always feel this way over change. So I feel that we're really letting the side down. And I want to connect that change management skill building. I believe it is around well-being, and we have a duty of care. However, if I want to get sign off from senior leaders, I'm going to have to make sure that I connect it back more to commercial imperatives and actually being able to cope with more and more change, I think, if I'm honest. And it's just sad that the role modelling, which was never that great, has just fallen again. You know, I talk about this a lot on my training courses, you know, about how I think as change professionals, a lot of what we have to do is to actually spoon feed senior leaders into role modelling. I find an example of something somebody's done and I talk to them about how that would, if you let other people know that you've had this experience, I think it would really sort of send the message, I'm changing too, I'm in it with you, that whole one team culture thing. And I think a lot of my coaching is about helping people draw out the shortcuts, the little horror stories they've had, so willingness to be vulnerable. But I have to work with senior leaders to find the role modeling stories and make sure that they are propagating them out. So that's something that I think is something we can all do, and something I think we have to do to really take this forward. Without senior leadership involvement, this has a big impact on the next one. Skills. Now, this, again, I have no answers. I can only raise questions. But how did we get to a situation where skills for change management are known and respected has been falling year on year for 3 years? Whereas sort of we develop change management skills in our people has slightly increased, but really still around the halfway mark. But skills for change management are known and respected continues to fall. So will we start to see a fall in we're developing change management skills in our people? You know, if we don't, if they're not respected, why would we keep training in them? People have the time to adopt new ways of working is less than half. I know it's slightly up, but it's less than half. And responsibility for change is shared between staff and managers, slightly up. But the point is that a lot of the time staff would argue that they are the ones bearing the brunt. Do these figures at less than half, and certainly just over a third for skills for change management are known and respected, does this look like a good jumping off point for a high volume and a continuing high volume of change? So think about that. And I also want to tie this around to the next piece, which is we're going to be looking at how do we build our approach and what experience people are having of change. These figures are very, very low. We need an intuitive and simple approach that everybody can follow, not just people who see themselves very much in the change role. So perhaps there is a highlight here in that people think that managing change is important, that they're having those conversations. That would be a good starting point. But we review the effectiveness of change activities. Well, hang on a minute, we're not doing that. And just further down, we track that our approach is followed and that we update our change activities with lessons learned. So just over half of these figures. Hang on a minute, we are supposed to be a profession. Surely it should be, those figures should be in the 90s, shouldn't they? We review the effectiveness of the change activities, and we update those activities with lessons learned. Well, how can we update them with lessons learned at 65% if only 56% of us think that we actually review the effectiveness? So, but they're obviously low figures. So surely that should be the norm. It should be 95% of the time we look back and go, did that work? Should we do it again? Is there a better way of doing something? And also we have an approach. If we have an approach, but we're not tracking whether or not it's being followed, then the message that I think that's sending is, well, you could do it this way or do it any way you fancy. It's, how you manage change around here, it's optional. We have got a toolkit, we have got a framework, but it's up to you if you follow it. That is absolutely killing off the idea that we are a profession to be respected, because we're basically saying, well, follow it, don't follow it, it's up to you. One thing. And the other thing is maybe it shows a total lack of confidence in our approach. Instead of going, this is absolutely brilliant, we think everybody should be using this, we're going, follow it if you want to. It's up to you. We don't track whether you're following it. We don't update it with any lessons learned. So don't worry about it. So this page really, really irritates me, because I know how hard it is to convince, for example, senior leaders to get involved. So going back to this one, I know this is incredibly hard. I know how hard I have to work to get them to role model changes. Right? I get it. And battling for the resources for change is incredibly hard. And in light of low responses from senior leaders, it continues to be hard. But this one's ours. And we could be doing so much more. Why are we letting something as simple as tracking if people are using our approach, updating our approach with lessons learned? Why are we leaving the door wide open on that one? That I don't get. So the only thing I can think of is that, as with all process work, it's one of those things where I'll get to it when I've got a bit of time. So maybe instead of getting annoyed, I should be more empathetic and go, actually, this is a product of overworked change people. And we know from various surveys that we've been doing in the change capability community, often we are a very small group. Jill's been working on a change where it's her and she's managed to recruit one other. A number of you are on your own. There are a number of you who are in small teams of change experts, 2, 3, maximum 4 people. So perhaps this whole thing about our approach and that whole idea of building professionalism for change management is just because we can't get to it, because we've got so many other changes we're trying to support. And therefore, with all of this, senior leadership involvement, prioritising and tracking our changes, having an approach that we use, measuring the benefits, feeling that what we're doing is impactful, all of these things come back together again to, well, what's the experience of change? We are getting better at talking about the pressures, great. But people feel empowered to get things done is very low, just over half, and it's sort of skidded around that half, 50, 58, 54, 57 for 3 years. So that tells me something, that we might be talking about the pressures of change, but perhaps people do not feel empowered to tackle them, to deal with it. It's great that 3/4 of us are acknowledging and celebrating achievements, but I'm going to align that back to benefits, because what worries me is that we are not tracking the benefits of our change. So we said that 37% of us always measure the benefits achieved from change, but 3/4 of us are acknowledging and celebrating achievements. So there's a problem. Are we acknowledging people's involvement and participation and turning up for things? But because we're not measuring, does it make any difference? We're not celebrating the positive impact of change. So we're celebrating busyness and involvement, but we're not celebrating results. That bothers me. That's something I will put for you to think about. And another very worrying one, and I think this aligns back to the fact that we're just not building skills in people in change management. People who struggle to manage change feel supported. No, only half of them do. So the other half, no, there's no involvement. That's I think of concern. And I think maybe people who are struggling to feel supported, people know change is coming, people believe in the need for change. All of these things go to a very low figure. 4 in 10 believe that our level of change is manageable. That hasn't changed in the last 3 years. The volume of change continues to rise, but we don't feel that this is manageable. 6 in 10 don't feel that the situation is manageable. Again, I think that therefore, what factors, you can pull out any of these factors and think in your own organisations, what is it that we can do to improve these figures? And as I come towards the end of this, I will make some conclusions on that. Jill?
I was going to say our level of change is manageable. That's one of the ones that across industries does change a lot. So pharmaceutical was 13%, whereas oil, gas and nuclear were 56%. So there's some big differences there.
Yeah, it's I take encouragement from anywhere that is doing it, but I think across the board for everybody that's on this call, I think, you know, we've got work to do, and I thought I'd just put up my own thinking on what's the next steps. Obviously, we're going to provide you with a full report where we've come up with some of this analysis. Please share this recording with others. You'll get the link to the recording and use it and the report to debate the recognition and value of change management in your organisation. Which factors do you think are really attracting your attention? Which of these low numbers can you use to perhaps let other people know that this is a more endemic problem than just in your organisation? Form a task force that increases this value. Based off the feedback from the change capability community and the results of this, we are also in development of a masterclass. So those of you who are on the Changeability Pro platform, you'll know that we have neuro hacks, which are 5 to 8 minute sessions, which give you a solution to how to do something. Our masterclasses have the first one we released was Building Your Change Network, have gone down an absolute storm, and we are committing to putting another one in the platform, which is actually how to help you establish the strategic value of change management. So upping the perception that change management is something valuable and that the organisation needs to do and do it well. And I think that will give you the starting point for building your own cultural change program, because I think we shouldn't make any misunderstandings here. Raising the importance of change management, arguing for the importance of change management is a real shift in what many organisations currently believe. And so we want to arm you with the information about how to do that. But your immediate action plan, I think, is to take away this recording, take away the full report, look at things and go, actually, I want to highlight a few things in my own organisation. So if you have a change network, if you are part of a group of change professionals in your organisation, this is the time for have a lunch and learn session. Next month is often quieter for many. Early January can sometimes be quieter for people. This is the time to really think about what your action plan is for next year on how we build this. Comments, questions, things that I can help with?
There are loads in the chat, Mel. We could go on. We could probably stay here another hour just going through all the comments in the chat. But there's some really great comments. So afterwards, I'm going to go through these and pull out some themes that we might want to add into the report. And also any ideas that people put on here for future events that we run for free, or any training that, you know, people would be interested in paying for that we put into our neurohacks or into our masterclasses?
Yeah, I think we've really got to take the fight now. I mean, we've got year-on-year evidence that the volume of change continues to increase. We've just got to, I passionately believe in this from a well-being point of view. There is nothing more soul-destroying than coming into work every day and feeling like you're being battered by so many different ideas, being threatened by the idea of, I don't know how to do that and I don't know how to do that. Stupid little things to the bigger things, like my partner plugged in a second screen on my desk, and although it's great that I can now use my laptop on my other screen, I've turned it off for this presentation because I tried to do some presenting this morning. It didn't go well, and I'm thinking, oh, I need to sit down and have a practice of that. When am I supposed to find the time to practice? And that's the feeling that everybody has all of the time at work. So how do we equip them with this idea of, right, maybe doing a bit of portfolio management for their own role and working out all the changes they're being affected by, being able to give them a much greater understanding of the changes that are likely to affect them in the next quarter and the quarter after that, so that people feel a bit more in control, there's a bit more certainty. I think there's so much more we can do, and it is all about reducing stress and pressure at work so that people can actually excel. You can't be innovative and creative if you feel overwhelmed all the time. So maybe that's the sort of thing that we need to be thinking about. So what